Module 4 of our water rescue awareness and operations level training. The expectation for this would be in operations, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to have the equipment out. We're going to be looking at it. In awareness, we're going to be talking about it. So this will be it'll take longer in a purely operations level class. So our equipment, what is different about our equipment versus recreational equipment? Obviously, we use a lot of the same techniques, but what does ours need to do? We're looking for equipment that will provide the maximum protection for the rescuer. All right. We need to be maneuverable. We're going to be operating on the shoreline. We need to have dexterity. It needs to stand up to the rigors of what we're doing. We're not sitting in a kayak. We're not looking at something that's just going to be in that kind of static configuration. We're moving with it. We're operating. We're swimming with it. So it needs to be durable. It needs to meet the requirements of the task. What does that look like? It should, be appropriate for us to go and effect a rescue. It should have knee pads, butt pads to support us in case we fall in. It should be highly visible, nothing dark. Part of our kit underneath our dry suit, obviously, are layers. So we layer our equipment in order to facilitate the best response to the environment. So what does that mean? In the summertime, I may be wearing vastly different than in the winter. However, I am able to layer appropriately to wear a dry suit without issue in the winter. Our layers provide insulation from a cold and wet environment. As it gets colder, obviously we're gonna focus on layers that'll help us with that, and we're gonna design them in such a way that I can add them or take them off if I need to. We're talking about our PPE. That inner layer wicks moisture away from the body to the middle layer. It provides a little bit of insulation, but it should be polypropylene, synthetic material, silk, or a combination. It should not be cotton at all. You commonly think of this as an Under Armour. I traditionally use a knockoff Under Armour brand, and I keep that sealed in its package in my deployment bag. And for the reason for this, obviously, being that if I go and I engage in a rescue in an environment where I'm exposed to gross water, it's a lot cheaper to throw away kit and easier than it is to decon a 50-pound or a $50 set of Under Armour. So, cheap champion knockoff stuff, and then I throw it away. Our middle layer wicks moisture away from the body. So what we're talking about is this is a puffed polyester fleece, ideally. In this case, this is a picture of the Mustang onesie. It's a double zipper, so you can open it from the bottom to get access to the relief zipper. And it's a nice thick fleece. That puffed material traps air, and this is the insulating layer. It does absorb moisture, but it provides that insulation. Also wicks away from the surface and pulls it to the end of those fibers. So big benefit there. There are different combinations of layers that you can wear in the middle. Obviously, this synthetic, or you can add wool. Some people do put neoprene underneath, or a mixed combination. However, traditionally in the fire service, we're going to be looking at a polyester middle layer, and ideally like some kind of fleece. So if it's in the spring months where we have unusual temperatures, we're going to be working on the shore, I may wear only a fleece upper so that I can remove that if necessary. Whereas in the winter, I'm going to be wearing, this Mustang onesie. Our outer layer, coated nylon, breathable water, and windproof fabric. What is that? It's our dry suits, that are wetsuits. So this is what provides our protection from the elements. Now that this could be a dry jacket, and just an upper, depending on the the nature of your response. But traditionally, we're going to veer to wanting to go with a dry suit. That being said, wetsuits are sometimes appropriate. So what is a wetsuit? Neoprene, varying thickness. When I used to surf, I could be wearing a 6 to 8 mil neoprene. Could have an integrated booty, could not. But how does a wetsuit work? A wetsuit takes water in, traps it against your skin, and that warms. So why would that be bad for water rescue, specifically flood response, versus maybe recreational style rescue? Well, that water's gross. I've said it a couple times. In strong storms, they can just open the gates, and what comes into the water treatment plant can go right out. If it's going to damage the plant, they have that authority. So, we do not want to be using that gross water trapped against our skin. So it's going to be minimally protective to our body. But you might be wearing it under a dry suit, especially, given the nature of your response, so you might have a smaller wetsuit that you're going to wear under a dry suit in colder conditions. The big thing is you might not get as much longevity out of your timing with this. And there's different designs. Ideally, though, if we're going to be using this, we're going to want to use one designed for what our goal is. It's going to be wet rescue. It's going to be search and rescue. It's going to be, that in-water use. We're not going to want to use some kind of diving wetsuit, because it's not going to give us the dexterity that we'd be looking for. We're going to recommend, obviously, dry suits. Various designs and durability. You can buy a $400 dry suit, or you can buy a $2,000 dry suit. Keeps the body dry, protects against contaminants. Very little thermal protection. So our thermal protection comes from the layers underneath. They can be breathable, or they could be sealed, nylon. And really, it's going to come down to how expensive they are. When we're talking about it, what's the difference in price? Well, here we have some less expensive cash-style dry suits. They don't have an integrated foot. So obviously we're going to be wearing like a neoprene shoe to go along with that. This has got a fixed neck seal. It's going to be cheaper. We compare that to our search and rescue base. This is an example of a Mustang Cash and a Mustang Fitted. You might be looking at $500 here, and these are $1,200 to $1,400 right here. Brand name does count. The material. Do you have relief zippers? Remember, if we're going to go with a cash style, they have more robust sizing. So a cash style Mustang, might have 6 sizes, whereas a specifically issued Mustang has greater fitment. The gasket design is going to be different. The Viking has a user changeable neck and wrist gaskets. What that means is I issue the wrist gasket and the neck gasket to the firefighter, but the suit is a cash, so they clip in their appropriately sized to neck if they have a wide variance. And then what's it used for? Is it surface or dive? And then, guys, we would have a bunch of examples of these from the shop in here to look at and pass around in that operations level class to show them. Exposure and ice rescue suits. These are never to be used in swift water training. They're dangerous in moving water. On the right, we have an inherently buoyant Stearns. You may see these, if you're watching Deadliest Catch, but some of ours have a better integrated boot and a better glove. The one on the right is more designed for, evacuation into the water. Ours are sometimes a little more robust, but the big distinguishing factor is they often have an integrated boot and an integrated glove, which allows us to don our gear quickly. So even if we're responding to ice incidents, I may have one person donning their gear to go initiate contact, stabilize that patient, hold them onto the mantle while our number 2 and 3 are getting their dry suits on, which is going to take longer. You can put one of these on in a minute. We got to be wearing helmets, liners, worn by all relevant rescue personnel, protects sides, head, and skull, protects against being struck by objects. The big thing is it should be rated by a certified agency for the use it's going to be used in. What that means is some helmets are rated for only rope or climbing. They're not rated for water. So look for that, certifying agency. Now, Whether that means you're going with a European Swiftwater rating or an ANSI kind of rating, that's up to your AHJ to determine our level of requirement there. However, what we're looking for is somebody has, applied, defined consensus standards to determine that this is an appropriate helmet. Should have a nice chin strap to protect from being pulled off our head, and if possible, some attachment points for lighting are also awesome. A helmet should have, not a significant brim if it's a water rescue helmet, because that's going to prevent it from being pulled off of our heads in current. That is one of the defining characteristics. However, some of the other things with respect to openings and everything else are up to interpretation. The big thing is, if you're operating in cold, wear a beanie underneath to minimize that convective action of water moving across our head. Gloves. We all wear them. They could be neoprene. Your hands are going to be wet. It's going to trap it up against there. Varying thickness. They could be 1 or 2 mil up to 3 or 4. In this case, this is the NRS glove. This glove is designed in such a way it's thick to be tremendous insulating properties. However, it's so thick you don't have the dexterity, so it's pre-bent for your fingers. This particular model has titanium in it. Their gimmick is that you can put it on your dashboard and warm it up on your way to the call. But anything we use, obviously we want it to be supportive in our mode of environment. So reinforced palms, because we're going to be operating rope. Footwear, all got to wear it. Should be neoprene. There's some other materials, usually neoprene. But big thing is it's got to have sturdy support for our ankles, good gripping sole. You're going to look for one full size bigger. The other thing is you're going to want to have like a captive upper or some kind of firm grip on the upper portion. So if you're just wearing a light wet shoe, the water can get trapped in there and pull it off. So one of the defining characteristics of this is, we want to see that upper that's lacing or, goes over the top of your foot and firmly holds it. PFDs. There's Coast Guard, rates 5 different types of PFDs. We have the near shore PFD. Commonly see it as, you might remember it as, that orange guy that goes over your head. But the design of it has a flap on the back, and that flap on the back is designed to roll us on our back. So type 1 is a near shore PFD. Type 2 is a far shore PFD, the difference being the amount of flotation for the expected amount of time floating in water. And then a type 3 PFD could look exactly like this one we're looking at here without the tri-glide. That type 3, could be a crappy sporting PFD all the way up to a purpose-designed rescue PFD. It really comes down to who they're designing it for, how much they're going to charge for it. An inflatable PFD is not appropriate for water rescue. Type 4 would be a throwable, so a ring buoy or a boat seat, throwable. And a type 5 is any type of specialty PFD. In our case, we're going to be looking for a Swiftwater Rescue PFD, which has a breakaway attachment in the back. There's other type 5s designed for kids who can't swim or animals and other things, but we're really looking at that type 3 or type 5 Swiftwater Rescue PFD. Got to be sized to you. The big thing is don't trim it in the summertime and then realize when you layer underneath it's not going to fit. Should have the appropriate amount of flotation. If it's a universal, it's going to have a certain amount versus something that's designed for XXL. They may have additional buoyancy included. Reflective high points, obviously we want to be able to see you if you go in the water. Pockets so that we can hold our required equipment: whistle, knife, two-locking carabiners, and a light. That Swiftwater Rescue Type 5 that many of us are going to be wearing in class is used specifically for water rescue operations. That's technician level. The big thing that we may do this is tether the swimmer. It's important to understand, though, that in operations we can wear that Type 5 because it's not about wearing the Type 5 breakaway. It's about being attached to something. So in operations, we are never, ever, ever getting attached to something. So you should put that thing on, keep the rings, reeve it so that there's no issue if a technician puts on that vest and they need that equipment, it's available. The big thing is we're just reinforcing that we never, ever get attached at operations. Integrated belt with quick release buckle, and that ring on the back. Big thing is it's got to be threaded correctly. It's got to be sized correctly. The buckle needs to be secured. It can't walk over. The new Mustangs walk a little bit. Sometimes the the clip handle goes underneath the pocket. The toggle ball should not be, the knot should be secure so you don't pull it off. We do not tuck or wrap the belt is the important distinction there. You must train with all of it though. And for our guys here, we're going to be doing some demos in class of its operations at awareness level. We're giving them that awareness. It's got to have that 2 locking carabiners. It's got to have the knife because that's going to be our secondary egress if we're unable to blow out. Sometimes if you don't thread it properly, it can get attached on things. If the twist won't go through the buckle, if it's twisted, it'll bind. If you catch it on something and it releases, which is less of an issue because we're going to blow out, but then you're tethering that, flat webbing out the back. The big thing is we're only going to use these with a locking carabiner. We'll demonstrate that for you though, but in operations, we are never using this. We're just reinforcing that this is what they're going to be doing at technician. We are never getting hooked up. And in class, we're going to demonstrate what happens when they go through the ring and also through one of those mole straps to really reinforce that it's important that they understand how dangerous it is. Besides our PPE and our, the importance of us understanding PPE, it's also important for us to have a thorough understanding of water dynamics, even at the awareness level, because you're going to help give us that insight. We got to know how to read water, and we're going to do that when we get down in our practical session. We're going to go down, you're going to point out some of these features, what we're looking for as we go through, and you're going to start building this knowledge base. And I'd recommend anytime you go out to water, start looking for these things. But on responding to incidents, do you have a bridge where you can see these things? Do you have a high point that you can see? Do you need to be in the water to see it? Can you get high to get a point? If it's nighttime, do you have night vision capability or enhanced lighting? Do you have binoculars to see some of those areas? Have you pre-planned so that you understand where some of these things are? It's really important. So when we're talking about water, you often hear it referred to as the class system. So this is a classification of the whitewater scale of river difficulty. The big thing is this is based upon gradient, volume, river features, and constrictions. So class changes. If I go and I raft a type 5 out in the Youghiogheny River, that's during a dam release most often. And when there's no dam release, that type 5 feature may not be there. Where we're going to go to scutters very often can vary between, no feature at all up to a class 2, depending on how much water there is. And then as the water increases, it can wash out completely and go back to no features. The big thing to understand, though, is that current is it's not just, speed. It's a mix of speed and level and volume. So you can have a lot of water moving fast, depending on how those features constrict it, or a little water, that's moving slow. So a lot of water can be moving slow and not be a big deal. We can go to the Delaware and it's 20,000 and it's nothing at all. But 20,000 in some of other sites because of the constriction would be crazy. So it's important to understand that that's a variable reference. When we're talking about swift water versus surface water, NFPA 1006 basically says that anything greater than 1 knot is what we're going to consider swift water. So that's for you guys to understand. The laminar flow of a body of water is that area where it's going to be traveling fast. It's going to be the deepest channel. It's often going to be found in the center, depending on how that's grown, not necessarily. When we're looking downstream, river left is always river left, while river right is always river right. It is not east, west, north, south. We're going to basically go up to the body of water, and it's in reference to looking downstream. If you're unsure which way the water is going, go in, throw a stick, and if it travels to the left, you're on river left. If it travels to the right, you're on river right. So that's how we're going to refer to it. The helical flow forms, as rotational currents that come off of that laminar flow on the side. So you'll see like mini pockets of rotation that occur in there. So here we can see the top of the screen would be downstream, the bottom of the screen would be upstream. What is on the left? All right, that is river left, right, and the right is on river right. If we're going around a turn or a bend, the outside bend and the inside bend are going to have different characteristics, okay? So the outside bend is going to be faster. And its effect of being faster, you may have undercuts on that outside bend, and it could be deeper because as it's faster, it can carry more objects. As you move to the inside bend, it will slow down as it goes there, and it's going to have more debris drop down. That's the thing. You may be on this island here in the middle of this particular river feature and getting someone, and if you have the option of going river the inside bend side or the outside bend side, even though it's closer, you may determine to go on the inside bend because it's traveling slower. So it's just something to think about. Here we can see a downstream V. We actually want to do upstream V first. I'm going to move those around. I'm going to flip those in the presentation. The upstream V is a V that is pointing away from you, all right, as you're traveling downstream, and that's going to signify an object in the water. A downstream V forms when we have two upstream Vs. That is the area between them where they join. So it's an area of refuge. It's an escape area. It's that area in between where you're not going to have those obstructions. So as we're floating down in our defensive position looking at this, we may be scoping these things out. Strainers, sweepers. Strainers at the underwater, sweepers at the surface. You know, it could be a fence or it could be a branch. A sieve, as water travels over drops, you know, it can erode the water. You may see this in recreation, or even for us, as we're responding to some of these incidents. They may be areas where we could get a foot entrapment, or it could collect as current and somebody could go in them depending on how large they are. When we're talking about an obstruction in the water, as the water hits that obstruction and travels around it, creates an area of recirculating current behind it called an eddy. The area just defining the line between the eddy and the downstream current is the eddy line. All right, and that is the eddy. So that is that recirculating current. If you go in there, you're just going to float around until you exit. Some things is as that travels around, the water gets kind of spit out on the top and sucked in on the bottom. So as you're trying to exit, you may actually have a hard time depending on how strong it is. But this is a nice little area of refuge for us. As water hits an obstruction, you can see here it's traveling up the upstream side a little. It's going to form a pillow. All right, so that pillow is as water travels up. If there is no pillow, that could signify an undercut. So in this case, this is a dimple rock in the Youghiogheny River, and this is a very famous undercut. People get pulled in there all the time. There's signage that says "Get out" and portage around this area so that you don't go underneath it. However, people still get trapped and die. As you can see here, it's not just natural. As the water's hitting those tires, it forms a pillow, but because there's a place for water to go in between, that's an undercut. So if you walk up to this on the upstream side, you're going to get sucked underneath that Dodge Ram. And I don't think you're going to have an easy time getting out of there with your PFD if you get sucked under there. So we do not want to be in that area. Haystacks, wave trains, downstream Vs moving faster. You know, there could be a bunch of underwater obstructions there causing that. Low-head dams, you know, as we come up, a low-head dam's noticed as a horizontal line. That horizontal line on the backside is going to form a hydraulic. You know, these are drowning machines. And guys, I'm going to update this with a video, so I'm going to link to it, and this is going to be a couple low-head dam videos. But in this case, as the water plunges to the bottom, creates a recirculating current. As that water travels back up, a portion of it travels away downstream. Some of it gets sucked back into the face. That's the backwash. The boil line is the dividing line between the backwash and the outwash. So everything inside there is getting sucked back into the face. And we saw that in the video earlier. You're just going to get bounced around in there. These things are drowning machines. We should pre-plan them, understand where they are, so that we don't get sucked into, we don't get trapped in one of these. as we respond, we got to be mindful. What are the urban hazards that we're going to? So now in this slide, we're going to be engaging, the students. We're looking at, hey, here we've got fences. Hey, there's electrical there clearly. We've got signage. This is probably a parking lot. There's probably storm drains. When we're looking at this, we can see that this area that is normally about 5'5", the water is up above that area. So you could very easily get pulled into the main flow of the river if you went in here. Do they see this sign? Here we have a dumpster floating undercut, so if that's pinned on something, you can get in there. This is the waterworks. This is in New Hope. That's a parking garage, and there's a canal for the Delaware in that area, so we can see the little bridge going over the canal, and that's a parking garage. So if you came up on the front side of this where there's opening and windows, where do you think you're going? You're going down in there, man. That's a sweeper, and you're dead. So we need to have an understanding of these locations. There's another floating undercut. This is a reefer. What are the hazards of that? That thing is clearly 2 to 3 feet higher. If you go under, you're stuck. Urban, as the flow characteristics change, at a certain point they're getting spit out, but then they may get sucked back in. And these other response hazards that we need to be mindful of. As we're responding to these incidents, what is are we in flood response and search mode? Am I bringing tools to get into the roof if they've, evacuated to the attic? Just some of those things to keep in mind. If the water's this high, what hazard do we have there? Right? Electrical. Something to think about. What was in that yard? Here we have, New Hope normally, and then this is during these conditions, right? So here we can see, the difference in these bridges. The water is normally 20 feet below this, so it gives you an idea of what you're responding into. Again, these bridges, these are sweepers. However, things are going to get caught on them, and they're going to form strainers on the front side. So don't assume because maybe you can see through that you're hazard-free. You may get hung up on something. We have to have the obvious understanding that there's going to be chemical implications of responding on these incidents, right? So the hazmat understanding. All right, what is in the background that we can see here? Junk cars and trucks. So we've got a junkyard and all the material that's there. We've got a storm drain. At a certain point, this is going to change directions. And I'm going to add a video here of a little girl walking to school, and she gets sucked in one of these. All right, what do we have here? So, you spend a couple of minutes talking about this slide, where it looks like. Is the water coming from right to left or left to right? All right, so obviously the right side is downstream. We can see that because of the current that's forming and pushing on the fence. The fence is a strainer, right? What's being formed behind the house? That's a big eddy, right? So if we were to approach this house to make a rescue, where are we coming from? The upstream side or the downstream side? Right? We could just go through a window on the downstream side. On the upstream side, we could get pushed right into that fence. So it's something to think about.